And today's challenge is going to be doing a transmission fluid flush refill on this 2014 Toyota Highlander. This particular model has a transmission that's similar to just about everything Toyota was building for a decade or more. So this will apply to a whole lot of other vehicles, including most Tundras, most other mid-size and smallish sedans and SUVs. So we're going to get this thing up in the air so we can get under it more comfortably. Going to lift it on all four corners, level it. But the first step you need to do is to loosen the lug nuts on the driver's side front, and you'll see why later. Okay, a little fiddling around later, and we basically got a good level here. That's important. And the next step is to take off these two 10mm bolts to move this out of the way. So that gives you access to your fill port. An important job in any fill port, where you're draining something and filling it, is first loosen the fill port, because if you have a problem with that and you drain it and then you can't get your fill port off, you got a bigger problem. So let's make sure that comes off. I believe that's a 24.
Want the alloy steel one?
All right, that's good. So I'm just going to loosely put the fill port cap back on to keep insects from flying into the transmission. Front splash guard has to come down. Normally it's got 3 push pins. This one's got 1 or 2 left. It's got 1.5 left, plus a whole bunch of 10mm screws, so they all come out. It's obvious. And keep the front ones separate. The ones along the front bumper line are these coarser wood metal screw kind of screws, and these are sheet metal type screws. All right, most times when you're thinking about draining, you just go to the drain plug, you pull it out, you drain it, you put it back in, you call it a day. This is a little different. This will only get you about 2 quarts out of the pan, and we want to do a better drain and fill than that. We want to get a whole lot more of the old fluid out, so we're going to use a different method. This actually ends up becoming the way you set the level, and we'll show you that later. But for now, what I'm going to do is come over here behind the radiator, next to the driver's side, or the passenger's side, the right side. Big hose on the bottom here is the output of the transmission cooler that's integral to the radiator. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pinch this clamp and slide it up this tube, and then work this tube off and use this as our drain point. All right, and I can tell you right now, folks, that fluid is ugly. Look at this. That is not happy transmission in there. And there's a lot of ways to get the fill funnel in, but this is possibly the easiest. I ran it down right next to the battery there. Runs it behind this panel, which can be pulled out of the way, so that you can the fill spout can enter at a slightly downhill angle, and it's only going to go in about 1 inch, if that, because of items inside this fill port. But that ought to be fine. So now what we want to do is put in 3 quarts, which is going to quite severely overfill the transmission for the next step. Okay, now that that's done, we'll go ahead and pull pull the hose out after it's fully drained and put the fill plug in loosely. And we're ready to start the next process. Okay, now we're going to start the car and we're going to let it run for a while, which is going to start pumping fluid out of this hose, not the other one as I initially suspected. So it's going to pump it out of here into the bucket. We're going to shift through the gears to make sure we put fluid through all of the passages that it will normally live in during normal operation. And we're going to run it until we start getting air out of here, which would indicate we've just essentially nearly emptied the transmission of fluid. So go ahead and start it up and just start shifting it through the gears. Okay, just leave it in park. Okay, and now that we've got a nice bucket full of nasty old fluid, the time has come to disconnect our hose here, which may actually release a little fluid, so I want to position the bucket correctly. All right, not too bad. And then get it out of the way. And now put the original coolant hose back on. Slide it all the way down. Grab your pliers. Slide the clamp back down to the end where it belongs. And you're done down here. Okay, next step, let's fill this thing back up. Okay, and you can see we got a lot more out than you're going to get just draining the pan, which is only a couple quarts max. So we're way ahead of the game. We've got probably, I'm guessing, 10% of the fluid left in the transmission. And remember, half of that is going to be new fluid because we put 3 new quarts in. So by the time we get done, we're looking at 90-95% new fluid, which is pretty amazing. So let's go ahead and take the fill plug out. Put the hose back in and get 4 quarts in here, which will overfill it. That's important, and I'll show you why later. All right, now one thing I'll always do is I will use the manufacturer of the transmission's recommendation on fluid. There are generic fluids you can get. They're usually pretty good, but you know what? The transmission is the weak point in just about any modern vehicle. It's the thing most likely to take it off the road, send it to the junkyard. So I just go with what the guy who built the transmission says to use. In this case, Toyota ATF fluid is the way to go. We got 4 quarts queued up here. And quite honestly, guys, I like this stuff. I am not a snake oil guy. This is pretty much the only snake oil I do use. I've used this to actually cure some shifting problems. This particular car had a delayed engagement in drive, which could have been low transmission fluid, or it could have been a stuck shift solenoid. And just in case it was the latter, I'm going to put this in. This is really good for this. I've used it on Hondas and Subarus, and it's worked very well. So just as preventive maintenance, that's what I'm going to do. So that and 4 quarts, and we'll be ready to start it up again. All right, I did manage to get this poor mangled old fill plug gasket off. It's really past it, folks. It had been used apparently a couple times before. It is really buggered up. Worse yet, the mating surface to the transmission body had some serious gars in it. So it's always a good idea to replace those. It is the fill port. It's not really going to leak much. I don't care what happens, but it's always better to go to your local dealer or wherever and get a new one. So now we will be leak-free and happy. Okay, and now we have to bring the transmission up to full operating temperature. To get the level correct, we have to know that the fluid is between 40 and 45 degrees centigrade, which is 103 to 113, I believe, Fahrenheit. So that takes a few minutes, so go ahead and start the car, and we'll start warming it up. Okay, we have the fancy schmancy bidirectional scanner hooked up, and we're monitoring the automatic transmission oil temperature through the automatic transmission computer. And you can see we're coming up on the low end of the scale. It's currently at 37.5. We're shooting for 40 to 45. If you prefer Fahrenheit, you just switch to that. And like I say, 103 is the bottom. So we'll go ahead and stick with metric because that's nicer, rounder numbers. So all we have to do is wait for that to come up to temperature. And then we're going to shift it through the gears a few times and get under the car and do the final level set. All right, I've pre-positioned my bucket down there. I've got my 6mm ready to go. We are coming up on 40 degrees centigrade. So I'm going to go ahead and run it through the gears a little bit over here. Just put it in reverse, neutral, drive. What that's doing is that's pushing the fluid through all the places that the fluid is going to be in normal operation, so that you know when you're done, the fluid level will be right with everything as it should be when you're actually using the car at full operating temperature, which is the state that you're setting it in. So again, we've got 40 degrees, we are good to go. So I'm going to crawl into the car and do the last step, and I'm going to keep it running. Don't turn it off, folks. All right, trick here. If you don't have a temperature gauge, just a FYI, the pan is slightly warm to my hand. It's like definitely would be a barely warm shower. Just a little warmer than your hand is where you're shooting for. Now, basically this looks like a drain plug, but inside that there's a plastic tube that goes up above the level of the fluid. Basically, it is at the level of the fluid when it's absolutely proper. So when I take this off, fluid is going to drain out of here until the fluid level drops to the top of that tube, at which point it's perfect. So I'm going to loosen it. And then get my bucket in position. And it's going to be warm, but it's not going to be terrible. So I'll take one for the team. So basically the trick here is you want to let it drain until it stops running out as a stream. Whenever it gets to the point where it's just a thin trickle, then you want to put the plug back in. And if you notice, folks, you can see red in this fluid. That's a major improvement. So the fluid condition is obviously much better. Now again, keep in mind we put at least a quart, maybe a quart and a half over capacity in there, so this amount of draining is not at all surprising. We just have to wait for it to subside. Okay, there we go. All right, and after that little kerfuffle, it's time to get it snug back up. So, again, with a new gasket on it. Okay, we are pretty much done. So let's make sure we got no leaks at this end where we disconnected it. Everything is back snugged up where it ought to be. And we're basically ready to put the bottom pan back on. Okay, the splash pan is back in place. The transmission fluid is full. Everything's buttoned up here. We are ready to put the hood down. Okay, all buttoned up. And just in time to get the car to the concours competition. All right, the first drive so far. No funny noises, no jerks, no bumps, no slips, no shudders, no vibrations, other than that are from the dirt road we're on. So far, so good.